So, hello and welcome to our second lecture video. So, we're still on virtue ethics, but for this video, we will be discussing the non-Western traditions. So, you might ask, Sir, bakit diniscuss natin yung Greeks dun sa first video and then tumalon tayo sa ibang kontinente? To give you some background on this, some of my students have been requesting, like, um, based on their questions from the previous semesters, like, um, sir, can we consider Buddhism as a philosophy rather than a religion? How about Confucianism? Where do they lie in the ethical tradition? Are they religions? Are they philosophies? Or all those things? So this lecture video will address that concern, and I hope this will broaden our perspectives on virtue ethics, because it's not just Aristotle, it's not just Plato, for example. We also have virtue ethicists from our own continent here in Asia. So the focus of this video would be two philosophies. We have Confucianism and Buddhism. Okay, so let's go first to Confucianism. So this is the way of life propagated by Confucius, or that's actually his Latin name. His actual name is Kung Fu Tse. Kung Fu Tse, but we call him Confucius because that's the Latinized name. He lived from the 6th to 5th century BCE, and it's followed by the Chinese people for more than 2 millennia. And this is one of the most significant philosophical movements in East Asian societies because it has influenced China, Japan, Korea in terms of their cultural, social, and even the political organization of these respective countries. Now, if you look at, for example, K dramas, if you are a fan of period dramas and K drama, um, ano ba magandang example ng period drama na Korean? Love in the Moonlight, for example. 100 Days My Prince, diba? This was set during the monarchy in Korea. That is actually a Confucian society. Okay? The emphasis of Confucianism is social harmony in the community, respect for elders, for example, and the importance of the hierarchy. And we have to understand also that Confucianism is inherently communitarian, meaning it's more of a social practice. So there is no room for the individual here. I'm reminded of this Japanese proverb. Ano yung sabi ng mga Japanese, di ba? The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Ibig sabihin ng umuusli na pako ay pinapako pabalik. So Confucian societies are usually conformist by nature. Okay. So, what are the virtues or what are the advice in Confucianism? The first is Ren. Okay. Or we can translate it as goodness, benevolence, or dignity for the human life. And last but not the least, it's the characteristic that makes humans humans. Okay. Something that what makes them what they are, or what makes us human, for example. So when you look at these virtues such as goodness and benevolence or dignity of the human life, this is somehow similar to the Western understanding of what human dignity is, but it's a deeper understanding for the Confucianists, or Confucians rather. Ren is mostly the goodwill of the person. Okay, the goodwill of the person, the desire not to do harm, for example. And then we have the yi. Yi is the ability to decide what is right or wrong. Okay. Another idea that yi focuses on is some actions ought to be performed for the sole reason that they are right, not for the sake or good of someone or something else. So yi is similar to the Kantian concept of deontology. You do things because it's the right thing to do, not because you will get something out of it. Okay? And this is, again, like I said, it's similar to Kantian philosophy or Kantian deontology, because if it's the ability to decide what is right or what is wrong, it's somehow related to rationality. Okay? This is one characteristic of a human person. You have Ren and you have Yi. Another is Qi. Okay? A man must be intelligent enough to meet anything without fear, or what we call as fortitude. Okay? Whatever challenges you have in life, okay, whether it's poverty, a tragedy, for example, knocking on wood, diba? Loss of life, you have to face it calmly, with reason, and with the understanding that it's a part of life. Okay? It's part of intelligence in a way that na you do not react to it with panic, for example. Ito yung tinatawag nating presence of mind, for example. You do not also react to it that you are clouded by your emotions. Okay? It's meeting anything without fear because it's the acceptance that life has its ups and downs. Okay? Life has its ups and downs. Um, there are happy times, there are sad times, but eventually, how you respond to those would be a manifestation of your chi. Okay? And then we have also xiao. Okay? Xiao is respect for all people, especially elders. Like what I said earlier, Confucianism is actually has an emphasis on filial piety, meaning there's the importance of the family, especially the elders, because the understanding here is that elders possess wisdom that comes from their experience of life. It's not just because they are older, okay? They are respected because of the wisdom that they have acquired through life, diba? Um, somehow, Filipino society is somehow confusion because of our respect for elders. Well, most Asian societies are. And our respect is not based on age actually. It's based on wisdom. The wisdom that they can offer to us. Diba? We have this Filipino saying, papunta ka pa lang, pabalik na ako. Diba? Because they have experienced all this. Okay? They have experienced what it means to be in a situation of adversity, for example. They have experienced what it means to be proud of themselves. So, the importance of elders here is not so much because of their age. Again, it's mostly because of their wisdom of life. And then finally, te. Te is the power of moral example when men rule. What does this mean? Um, this is more of the social aspect of Confucianism. For Confucius, a well-ordered society can be seen if and when its rulers are well-ordered also. So if the rulers are virtuous, you would expect society to be virtuous. Okay? If the rulers are imbibed with vice and evil, okay, you would not expect their respective societies to progress morally. Okay? That's why in China, for example, even if they have undergone atheistic communism for the last 70 years, they have this understanding that once there are evil occurrences in the country, tragedies, corruption scandals, for example, large scale loss of life through pandemics, for example, earthquakes, storms, whatever. That is what they call as the loss of the mandate of heaven. Meaning, the rulers have become so corrupt that heaven is punishing them. They have lost the mandate of heaven. They have lost the approval of heaven for what they are doing. And therefore, it's time for them to go. Okay? So, do not underestimate the moral example of our leaders. Okay? So, that is what Confucius is saying. Okay. And then we now go to Buddhism. Buddhism is actually not a religion. It's somehow between a religion or a philosophy. But for the sake of discussion, we will classify it as a religion. So it's a non-theistic religion. So Buddha is not a god. Okay, there is no belief in a creator god, and it's also considered again as a philosophy and a moral discipline. So it originated in India in the 6th and 5th century BCE. somehow similar timelines with Confucianism. So it was founded by the sage Siddhartha Gautama or the Buddha. Interestingly, Siddhartha was a Hindu prince before he achieved enlightenment under the banyan tree and became the Buddha. Okay. So, um, as Filipinos, especially those Filipino Chinese, our understanding of the Buddha is usually the fat one, diba? Napapalibutan ng maraming bata and gold coins and gold na I don't know kung gold bars ba yon as an object of prosperity. But actually, Buddhism is actually a very ascetic philosophy and religion. We often get confused the Buddha from the Chinese monk Budai. Okay? Buddha is the Chinese monk, yung mataba. Okay? Buddha is Siddhartha, the enlightened monk of India. Okay. So let's look at the doctrines of Buddhism here. So the basis of Buddhism is the recognition of the Four Noble Truths. What's the Four Noble Truths? These are the fundamental truths that man must understand. Okay, so it's slightly metaphysical because it explains the problem of evil for them, and it explains also the nature of human will. So what are these Four Noble Truths? First, the truth of suffering or dukkha. Life is suffering. It's filled with suffering. Okay? It's filled with suffering. Our first experience of suffering as babies was nung bigla tayong tinuro ka ng injection. Tama? As we grow up, di ba, nadadapa tayo, masakit yan, nakakasakit tayo. We face challenges in schooling. We face challenges with our friends, with our romantic relationships, within our family. So all of life is suffering. Okay? That's the first noble truth. The second is the truth of the origin of suffering. If all of life is suffering, what is then the origin of suffering there? Okay? What's the origin of suffering? According to the Buddha, the origin of suffering or the samudaya is desire. Okay? All of suffering is rooted in desire. Okay. What does this mean? Bakit hindi ka makatulog sa gabi, kakaisip dun sa nakita mong magandang laptop kasi hindi mo siya mabili, wala kang pera. Okay? So you suffer because of it. At hindi ka, bakit hindi ka makampante sa buhay mo ngayon? 'Di ba? Ba't hindi ka makapante sa buhay mo ngayong nag-aaral ka online? Dahil wala kang friends to chill with, right? There's no room to chill after school, for example. Hindi ka makalabas ng bahay. The desire to go out of your homes, to socialize with friends, even if it's restricted, again, it's a desire, right? And all other things, all other suffering of life is based on desire. Okay? The third is nirodha, the truth of the cessation of suffering. But, sabi ni Buddha, this suffering can end. Okay? This suffering can end. Nirodha says that in order for your suffering to end, you have to let go of those desires or what we call as detachment. Diba? So it's not just detachment from desire, but it's also detachment from all other material and immaterial objects that may cause suffering. That's why I said earlier, Buddhism is actually an ascetic way of life. It's not actually about magiging mayaman ka if you rob the golden Buddha or whatever, right? And then the fourth is the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering or Majja. Okay. It's pronounced sometimes as Maga, sometimes pronounced as Majja, but for the sake of consistency, we'll pronounce it as Majja. Majja is now the introduction to the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is the advice of the Buddha, how to overcome suffering. So what's this Noble Eightfold Path? So lahat yan merong right sa una. Okay? So you have right understanding or samadhi, right thought, sama sankapa, right speech, sama vaka, right action, sama kamanta, right livelihood, sama ajiva, right effort, sama vayama, right mindfulness, sama sati, and right concentration, sama samadhi. Okay, so In order to overcome suffering, in order to lead to a state of detachment, you have to have these eight virtues. You have to have right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. But when you look at it, it's very vague, right? It's very vague. It's very abstract. So let's try to dilute it using these. Okay. So the first is refrain from taking life. Okay, refrain from taking life. So for Buddhists, this means even animals. Okay, so many Buddhists choose to become vegetarian. That's why hindi sila kumakain ng manok, ng baboy, ng beef, ba? Even fish sometimes. Um, in order to overcome suffering, you have to refrain from taking life because it's also related to the idea of karma. Okay, karma or dharma. It's actually the same. Karma or dharma means that if you inflict suffering on others, that the suffering that you inflicted on others will somehow come back to you. And it's an eternal recurrence or an eternal cycle. Okay? So kahit mga lamok at ipis, hindi nila pinapatay. Kahit daga. Okay? And then, refrain from taking what is not given or not stealing from anyone. Okay? So, most of our desires are actually desires for material objects. Diba? Gusto nating manalo ng loto, gusto nating palitan yung laptop natin, gusto nating magandang bahay, gusto natin magandang sasakyan, and all those things. So that is the root of our suffering. Ngayon, in order to overcome that, so refrain from taking what is not yet given from you. Do not desire what is not yet given. Okay? So kung naibigay na yan sa'yo, meron ka ng bahay, meron ka ng magandang laptop, meron ka ng magandang sasakyan, so enjoy it. Right? Enjoy it. At the same time, be conscious of how you use it also. And then, refrain from the misuse of the senses. So, not having too much sensual pleasure. So, for example, do not look at people in a lustful way because somehow it's related to committing adultery. When you look at others in a very lustful way, this has parallels with Christianity actually, di ba? In one of the sermons of the Mount, Jesus Christ says that if your eye makes you commit sin, just cut it off, 'di ba? Because when you look at others in a lustful way, that's already desiring a person, and that is already committing adultery in the heart. Okay, that's committing adultery in the heart, and then refraining from wrong speech. So do not lie, or do not gossip about other people, 'di ba? Because wrong speech, such as lying and gossiping, can lead to other evils or other suffering as well. It might not hurt you as a person, but it might hurt other persons. But again, remember the concept of dharma or karma. It's an eternal cycle. Okay, kung anong itinanim mo, siya ding bunga at siyang aaniin mo. O, parang doon nang galing yung kasabihan na yun, di ba? And then, ito, medyo mahirap ito, di ba? Refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. So, not drinking alcohol, especially kung mahilig kayo uminom, di ba? Or taking drugs because they do not help you to think clearly. Okay, so this is directed towards right concentration and right mindfulness. You cannot think clearly if you're always intoxicated, diba? Um, you cannot decide clearly if you are dominated by your desires. It's not just intoxication by alcohol or drugs. Okay? It's more of your desires. You cannot decide clearly if you do not detach yourself from the idea itself. So, for example, in decision making, you have to look first from it in a detached way. Like, ano ba pwedeng mangyari sa akin, 'di ba? Gagawin ko ba to or hindi ko gagawin to? Pag ginawa ko to, ano yung pros nito, ano yung cons nito? Pag hindi ko ginawa, ano yung pros, ano yung cons? So that's one part of detachment. Okay? So when you detach yourself from an idea, it's easier to decide. Okay? And then finally, we have the four exceptional virtues. Okay. So Buddhists have what we call the four exceptional virtues, meaning when you reach this, you have somehow achieved a level of enlightenment. But you are not yet enlightened, okay? Because usually enlightenment happens at the end of life. Diba? The Buddha was enlightened after conquering so much suffering. So the four exceptional virtues are as follows. First, you have compassion. So compassion is the disposition to alleviate suffering in all sentient beings. Okay, so hindi pwede na hindi pwede, kumbaga hindi ka makontento na hindi lang ikaw yung hindi naghihirap. Hindi lang yung pamilya mo ang hindi naghihirap. Lahat tayo dapat hindi naghihirap. So that is compassion. So compassion is somehow universal. Okay? And then you have loving kindness. So it's the disposition to want to bring happiness to all sentient beings. Okay? You want to share that happiness with others. Okay? So that's loving kindness. And then you have sympathetic joy. So it's the disposition to feel joy rather than envy at the success of others. Because sometimes, especially now in the age of social media, right? Um, we feel happy for the achievements of our friends, our colleagues, but at the same time, we feel very envious that they have achieved it, right? Diba? Naiinggit kayo kasi ibang friends nyo nakapagbakuna na, yun. Naiinggit kayo kasi ibang friends nyo gagraduate na. Naiinggit kayo kasi ibang friends nyo ang daming commissions, ang daming rackets. But if we have sympathetic joy, diba? You feel genuinely happy for them. There's no room for suffering anymore. That's pure joy. Okay? Talagang masaya ka para sa kanila. Diba? And then finally, we have equanimity. It's the disposition to experience the well-being of all other sentient beings as of equal importance as one's own. So it's the acceptance that one is not the center of the universe, or what we call also as selflessness. Okay, so this is one of the highest ideals of Buddhism. Selflessness. You are not the center of the universe. Okay, it's like you just fade into the background, and you the joy you experience will be the joy of others, and the joy of others will also be your joy. Okay, it's being one with the universe, ika nga. And this is what makes Buddhism very popular, especially among millennials and Gen Zs who are looking for an alternative to Christianity, for example. So if you look at the survey of religion in the United States, most of them are attracted to ethical Buddhism. Ethical Buddhism meaning they are not so much adherents of the religion. Like they do not do the chants, for example, they do not make temple offerings, ganyan. But the ethical values of Buddhism, they all follow it. So this ends my lecture on the non-Western perspective. So thank you so much for listening. I'll be posting another video on the critique of um, ethical frameworks by feminism. So thank you so much and stay safe.